You're very frank about what you're going through, how you judge your driving.
Yeah.
Some people think that's a weakness. Actually,
Yeah.
it's quite an important part of the process in terms of
Yeah.
improving, or you wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
So how do you see that all fitting together?
I mean, that's something that I would say I've changed over the years with. Sometimes I can be more, sometimes less critical of myself. Sometimes more and less critical of, of Will or Jarve and in a constructive way. But it's what we know is the best way of getting the most out of myself. And that's fine. I know I don't need to act like certain people want or certain people believe must be done. I act in the way that I believe is best for me to get the most performance out of myself, to get the most performance out of Will and Jarve, and they all have their own ways of doing things, So together it's then how can we get the most out of one another. But there's certainly more tense moments, There's more tense moments, and it's never always perfect. And actually this year, as well as it started, have been, I would say, some of the toughest times in terms of things, the stakes are certainly higher, and therefore you're probably a little bit more disappointed when things aren't going your way because you miss out on a win or a second or a third, or a podium. Miss out on certain points, which can be more critical than ever. But at the same time, that's when you want that support from Will or from Jarve more than almost ever had before. And understanding these things in a quicker way, a more efficient way. But we got our way, and that's all we really need in the end of the day. We don't need people on the outside saying past people haven't done that or past people have done that. I think we don't care in a sense of how other people think things must be done. I think we've spent enough time together to understand what we feel is best for ourselves and what we think is best as a group. And as long as we optimize that, and we believe that we're confident in getting the most out of one another, then I think that's all we need to be happy with in the end of the day. And comes with that, then maybe a win or a podium or whatever. But I think we all want to win, and we're all not satisfied when we don't achieve what we know we can achieve. And whether that's a 5th or a win or a 10th, our success and our happiness comes from just achieving what we thought was best on the day, rather than, like Will said, has to be a win or has to be a second, So doing it our way is our best way.
One of the things that regular listeners and watchers will get bored of me saying this, but I think one of the things that marks you out as a driver is you developed a very broad toolkit as a driver in terms of your adaptability, techniques, the use of the tools, race stints, single laps, etc. And then we got this really interesting situation this season where the car has sort of found itself in one of the few places where it's a little bit difficult for you, which is a really interesting challenge. Can you just describe kind of in simple terms where the I say struggle, where the very slight struggle is that means that maybe you'll be just that few hundredths off in certain conditions on a certain track?
Well, I think that's what it is. It's not like half a second off or often tenths off. We're talking about thousands and extracting the last hundredths or thousandths out of a lap. And that can be the difference between me coming across like I'm annoyed and frustrated, or very happy. It can be hundredths or thousands of a second. So I think we are talking smaller things. I think when you're behind the wheel, everything is exaggerated. As soon as you feel like you've missed out on 3 or 4 hundredths on a corner, you feel like, I've messed it up. What a terrible corner. But that can be the difference between me being on first or being 5th nowadays. That's how close it is. So I think this year, just a number of things have changed. McLaren's the only car I've ever driven, so it's almost what I'm most used to, but it's still changed a lot over the years. We've gone from having one of the worst cars on the grid to having the best car on the grid, and that doesn't mean it's not just as simple as the car is just quicker. How you have to drive it has changed a lot over the years, and I've had to adapt every single season to a different car. It's just always been called a McLaren, and it's always been in kind of papaya and that kind of thing, but it doesn't mean it's always been the same car. It's gone through a lot of changes, which is you would have hoped to go from last to first, and that's required a lot of adaptability from me. So in the end of the day, the answer for me being quick in a McLaren has never been because it's the only car I've driven, because the McLaren from nowadays could not be even compared to the McLaren of a few years ago. So one of my strengths, I think, is that adaptability and the ability to drive kind of whatever car I got. I also think that's just my job, is to go out and drive whatever car. But then there's the compromises you make as a team. How do you get the most out of one another? How can I get the most out of the car? And how can the team give me a car that I can get the most out of? And that's where there's just been a little bit more of a struggle this season, is we made the car better, like 100%, we have the best car on the grid. But it might just be that little bit trickier for me to get those last hundredths out of. And that's just what I struggle with. But I can feel those things. And like we just touched on, I'm not happy unless I know I've kind of got everything out of it. Whether that means I'm first or third or whatever it is. So this year it's been tiny things, and honestly it's very hard to put it into just the layman's terms of I'm struggling with this or that. It's just the underlying feeling that I've had with this car. Things just aren't flowing as naturally, and then when you have to drive in a manner which is a little bit less natural, even if you're adapting to things and you're trying hard to adapt to different scenarios and different way of driving, as soon as you have to maybe think in a slightly different way, that can cost you 200s, 300s, 400s. And when you're compromising things by 2, 3, 400s, that can be the difference between being on pole or third, And therefore I complain about those things, and I'm not happy with those things because I just want to be on pole and I want to get the most out of it. We want to get the most out of it. So in the end of the day, it's just my determination to win. It's just I'm not satisfied with not winning and not performing at the best. And then I'm critical of myself. I'm critical of how we work as a team. And that's why I come across the way I do. And that's why it's been a great year, but also a difficult start to the season, because things just aren't flowing as easily as what I would like. And I'm not able to get the most out of the car as what I was like. So, it's complicated. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that people just have no clue about and don't get to see. Maybe one day they get to know about it, but it's our job, Will's job, Jarv's job, my job to understand it and resurrect them as quickly as possible.
And do those characteristics make it hard to judge when you're reaching for perfection, where that perfection is? I mean, to use an example,
exactly what it is.
To use an example from last Saturday, turn 4-5 in qualifying.
Yeah.
Phenomenally quick through the weekend. You're just trying to ramp it up a little bit more speed, tiny bit of understeer, and it sets off what happens. And judging when you need to squeeze that tiny bit of extra speed out of something and when you need to stick has got to be the biggest challenge with this car.
Especially when you're going up against Max, when you're going up against Oscar, when you're going up against George, Charles. These are all guys which are trying to do the similar thing. And you can't afford to leave 100, 200, 300s on the table. So you're having to push it to that limit. And when you want to be able to push it to the limit, you got to feel every step of the way. You got to feel you're on the limit of the braking, the turn-in phase, the cornering phase, and the exit. And as soon as you just have a little bit of a mismatch and things aren't reacting as you think they should, and you're not able to kind of predict the understeer or predict the oversteer, you're having to think, and as soon as you have to consciously think, you're losing hundredths of a second or thousandths of a second, and that's just enough to make me happy and not happy, like I said. So the harder it gets, the more precision you need. The more precision you need, the more feel and on top of the car you got to feel, and that's an area I felt like I was very good at the end of last season and really understood, and I'm not able to be as on it as I was at the end of last year. And therefore, I paid the price in either some bigger mistakes or some lockups or different things. I'm not able to be as precise as what I need to be, and that's costing me. But it's not like I don't know how or why necessarily. I think we understand some of the reasoning, but we don't get many opportunities just to go out and try different things. We get a lot of laps in practice and things like that, but practice is not qualifying. It's not now you need to go out, find 1/10, but not make any mistakes. And it's a very risk-reward business where you kind of got to risk and get that reward, but you can't afford any of the failures and the downsides of it. But that's the level you got to be at when you're competing against some of the best in the world. I'm sure it's a similar story in other sports. So perfection is what's needed. Absolute feeling is what's needed. And unless they're not together and not in harmony, then you're going to be struggling a little bit.